I saw recently a story about a young man who came out of his house on Christmas morning and he found a little boy across the street who was looking with great admiration at the new car that was parked out the front of his house. And the little boy asked, "Does this car belong to you?" And the man said, "Yes. In fact, my brother just gave it to me as a present for Christmas." With that, the little boy's eyes opened wide and he said, "You mean to say that somebody gave this car to you and you didn't have to pay anything for it?" And the man responded, "Yes, that's right. My brother gave it to me as a gift." With that, the little boy let out a long sigh and he said, "I would really like," and the man fully expected this little boy to say he would really like his brother to give him a gift like this for Christmas. But the little boy said, "I would really like to be that kind of brother. I wish I could give that kind of gift to my brother for Christmas." Somehow this little boy understood the secret of Jesus' new commandment of love. Love is not in a feeling. Love is not getting something to fill something up within us. But love is about an active choice to give to others. That is the new kind of love that Jesus Christ is asking of us. Today's readings are about new things. The new Jerusalem, a new heaven, a new earth, a new creation, a new commandment, and a new way of loving. The first reading from the Acts of the Apostles describes new types of Christian communities that were established in the early church. And these communities lived a new way of loving. St. Paul and Barnabas, in the first reading, we're told that they visited and encouraged these communities. And by being Christians, people learned to live in a new and a different way. A way that was different to the Roman Empire, the way people lived in Roman society. A way that was different to the Greek civilization. And a way that was different to the Jewish way of life. A way that was based on this new commandment of Jesus' love. As a church, as families, as Christians, and even as Australians, we need renewal. And we need to be made new, as the second reading says. But renewal doesn't come through an election, even if that's what the media claims will happen. Renewal doesn't come by just following whatever the people are doing next door, or whatever the media might tell us to do, or just accommodating our lives to the way everybody else is living. That wasn't the new type of love Jesus was talking about. And that wasn't the type of love the early Christian communities were living. Renewal comes through a radically different type of community. A community that is authentic to this radical love of Jesus. And that's what we should be living and looking for in our lives. Authenticity and renewal in this love of Jesus Christ. Authenticity and renewal, they go hand in hand. We will not be renewed as Christians unless we are authentic to Jesus Christ. Let's not be fooled. If we just live the way of the world, we'll just perpetuate the disasters that are happening. But if we live the radical love of Jesus' new commandment, we become authentic. And we will bring renewal to ourselves, but also renewal to the world. Real renewal is not based upon a change of Prime Minister or a change of the Pope or even a change of the parish priest. Real renewal is authentically living the way of Jesus Christ. And what does Jesus Christ do? It's interesting to have a look. Jesus doesn't start with 5,000 people or 1 million people or 200 people. Jesus begins by creating apostles. by creating a way of life for the apostles. He gathers 12 people. They aren't all from one family. He gathers them from different professions, different backgrounds, different socio-economic classes, you could say. And he gathers these 12, these apostles, and he asks them to journey with him. They get to know each other. They pray together. They do active service together. And they walk in the way of Jesus Christ together. They don't do this in a big crowd. They do this in a group of apostles. If you have a look around Australia, the Christian churches that are growing the fastest are the Pentecostal churches, the Hillsong Church. And one of the elements of what happens in their church, and I've done a lot of study on their church. I've studied our own church and I've studied other religions as well. What is happening in the Hillsong churches, which I think is quite interesting and for us to reflect about, is they gather in groups of 5,000 on a Sunday, but then they encourage everybody to be part of what they call cell groups, which are small groups that gather during the week to pray together, to reflect and study the scriptures, to get to know each other, to love in the way of Jesus Christ, and then to live that out in active service. Everybody in their big churches of 5,000 people are encouraged to be part of groups of 12 to 15 people. And they gather outside of Sunday worship for these small cell groups. From a Christian or a Catholic perspective, we might call these apostolic works, apostolic groups, groups that help people to be apostles. And the renewal of Jesus Christ comes about through living a radical new way of life. And that's what St. Paul and Barnabas were doing. They were going and starting, not big churches with thousands of people. They were starting with 12 people in lots of different places. And we're told about this in the first reading. They went to Lystra, Iconium, Pisidia, Pamphylia, Perga, Italia, and Antioch. And those are just the ones that were mentioned in the handful of verses in the first reading. They didn't create big churches initially. They created small communities who were radically and authentically living the new commandment of God's love. And I think one of the greatest challenges for us as Catholics today is that we can come to church and be part of a church that might have 150, 200 people here at a Mass, or part of a parish that might have 1,000 people here on a weekend. But we can also be anonymous in that context. That we come, and are we truly living out this new radical commandment of love in our life every week? And so we need to be part of apostolic groups within the parish. And we have some of these, but we need many, many more. Groups like the St. Vincent de Paul Society gather together. They pray, they reflect, they support each other, they know each other, and then they go out and live the radical new commandment of God's love. The Legion of Mary do this as well. And there are a few other groups in our parish that do this. But as Catholics, we seem to have forgotten that we're called to be apostles. And being an apostle doesn't happen alone. Jesus doesn't just ask us to come into his life or allow him to come into our lives. He asks us to do it together as apostles. I think that's the greatest challenge for us as Christians today. Are we just living the values of Christ or living a relationship with Christ in isolation of others? Or do we do it together? The new commandment of love calls us to be active in our love for others, to be giving in our love for others. But it doesn't just happen between us and God. It happens together with others. So let us pray for true renewal in our world at this time, true renewal in our country and our parish. Let's not just expect that by going to the polls over the next few days that it's going to bring renewal. Renewal happens when each and every one of us decide to live the radical and authentic love of Jesus Christ, to love one another. I give you a new commandment: love one another just as I have loved you. You also must love